Have you ever looked at highly successful people and wondered what their real secret is? It's not just about grades, certifications, or even raw IQ. We all know people who are brilliant on paper, but consistently misread situations, overlook obvious risks, or make terrible decisions when life gets complicated. It's the difference between knowing all the steps to building a bridge and knowing where to place that bridge so it doesn't collapse in a flash flood. And then there are others, the quiet observers, the perceptive leaders, who consistently navigate complexity and achieve amazing outcomes, even when they start with fewer resources or less formal knowledge. Think of Jeff Bezos, who saw the second-order effect of the internet and pivoted from selling books to selling everything. Or consider Nelson Mandela, whose judgment and contextual wisdom transformed decades of rage into national reconciliation, making him one of the most effective leaders in modern history. For those who struggle despite high intellect, the difference lies in the missing piece of their education: practical intelligence and wisdom. This skill is not found in textbooks. It's not tested on the SAT. It is the ability to see reality clearly, understand people, anticipate the real-world consequences of your actions, and make the right move when it truly matters. It is the core competency that decides your success. Today, we're going to break down this essential skill, prove its power using real-world scandals, and give you the steps to start mastering it immediately. If you'd like to build the skill that transforms potential into success, please like, share, and subscribe to JPIW. Practical intelligence and wisdom are essential for everyone. If you have a high degree or technical expertise, practical intelligence is the skill that helps you apply your knowledge effectively without falling into real-world traps. If you are just starting out, practical intelligence is the skill that helps you acquire the right knowledge, know who to trust, and avoid major mistakes that could derail your journey. We define practical intelligence as the operational skill of knowing what to notice, what to question, and how to act effectively under real-world conditions. It includes the universal abilities to notice subtle cues and hidden dynamics, understand human motives and competing incentives, know who to trust and what to verify, judge risk and ambiguity accurately, and take effective, timely action. Think about how many times you've seen situations like these. Someone accepts a job offer without asking the crucial question, "Why is this position open?" Months later, they discover the real answer: high turnover due to a toxic manager. Or someone lends money to a friend because they seem confident, only to later realize they ignored subtle red flags, missing details, inconsistent stories, urgency that didn't make sense. These aren't knowledge problems. These are perception problems. These are practical intelligence problems. Here is another way to understand it. Knowledge is a map. Practical intelligence is the ability to read the terrain while walking through the jungle. Maps are helpful, but the jungle always has surprises. Unexpected valleys, sudden storms, deceptive paths, unseen dangers. Knowledge gives you direction. Practical intelligence keeps you alive during the journey. This skill is 100% learnable. Now let's see what happens when practical intelligence fails at the highest levels of business. In 2021, JP Chase, one of the world's most sophisticated banks, bought a financial aid startup called Frank for $175 million. The value was based almost entirely on the startup's claim that it had over 4.25 million student users. In reality, it had approximately 300,000. The practical intelligence failure here happened on both sides. First, the seller. According to federal prosecutors, the founder, Charlie Javis, allegedly hired a data scientist to fabricate over 4 million fake profiles to meet Chase's request for user data. This was a complete failure of situational awareness and real-world judgment. Practical intelligence would have immediately warned, a world-class bank will always perform deep due diligence. Can this fabrication survive even a simple audit or a basic verification email? And is the temporary gain worth total career and financial destruction when caught? Second, JP Chase also failed. How does a massive financial institution fail to verify the core asset, the user base, before paying $175 million? Employees inside Chase reportedly asked Frank for detailed verification. Instead of transparent data, they received vague spreadsheets and resistance. This is the moment practical intelligence should have activated. When someone refuses to provide clear, auditable data, it is a universal red flag. But urgency bias, reputation bias, and the desire to close the deal overpowered skeptical judgment. Here is the critical psychological failure. By the time the red flags appeared, Chase had already invested millions of dollars and hundreds of hours in the deal. Their failure to walk away is a perfect example of the sunk cost fallacy. They focused on the effort and money already spent rather than the rational risk of the future investment. They were too invested to quit, which led them to ignore their own employees and pay $175 million for a lie. The scandal shows that even the most educated, financially sophisticated institutions are vulnerable when they fail to apply practical intelligence. And the consequences were severe for both sides. Chase lost its $175 million investment and suffered public embarrassment. Charlie Javis and her colleague were charged with federal fraud, losing their company, their reputation, and their freedom. Practical intelligence is not optional. It is the shield of the beginner and the due diligence of the expert. Now let's look at the opposite. Practical intelligence used brilliantly. In 1982, several people died after taking Tylenol capsules that had been contaminated with cyanide in stores. Panic spread nationwide. The brand's reputation was destroyed overnight. Johnson & Johnson responded with extraordinary practical intelligence. They saw the real problem, a total collapse of public trust, not just a localized contamination. They immediately recalled over 31 million bottles of Tylenol. This cost over $100 million, but it sent a clear message. Our priority is human life, not profit. They then pioneered the first ever tamper-resistant packaging, setting a global industry standard. Imagine the alternative. Imagine if they had minimized the crisis or blamed the stores. Tylenol would have vanished forever. Their decisive, wise actions saved the brand. Sometimes practical intelligence fails not due to fraud, but due to pure situational awareness. Consider the case of Blockbuster. In 2000, Netflix founder Reed Hastings pitched Blockbuster's CEO John Antioco an offer. Netflix would run Blockbuster's digital presence, and Blockbuster would promote Netflix in their stores. The price? $50 million. Blockbuster, which was dominating the physical video rental market, laughed them out of the room. The CEO reportedly saw Netflix as a tiny niche service with no future. This was a colossal failure of practical intelligence. Blockbuster saw the world as it was right then: crowded stores, late fees, and massive profits. They failed to see the world as it was becoming: digital delivery, subscription models, and instant gratification. They failed to anticipate the second-order consequence of their own customers hating late fees. Blockbuster ignored the red flag of a new, faster competitor that solved the biggest pain point for their own customers. The price of that laugh was everything. Blockbuster is now history, and Netflix is a global media giant. Practical intelligence requires you to respect the small threat that solves a big problem. Let's break down the pillars of practical intelligence so you can begin mastering it. Situational awareness, the ability to see the invisible, the power dynamics, the tone, the context, the subtext. You walk into a room and instantly sense who has the real influence, even if they don't have the highest title. Social intelligence, the ability to read people and their motives. You recognize when excessive praise is a setup for a favor. You notice when someone's insecurity is disguised as confidence. Incentive analysis, the ability to understand why people are truly acting. You see the hidden rewards, money, status, or approval, that explain behaviors more honestly than their public statements do. Judgment, the ability to choose wisely when the path is blurry. You recognize that the highest paying job might destroy your work-life balance. You choose long-term wisdom over short-term excitement. Contextual wisdom, the acceptance of unpredictability and the ability to balance multiple values: individual gain, relationships, ethics, and long-term impact. This is the ethical and empathetic framework that ensures your effective action leads to a good outcome for society, not just yourself. Protective wisdom, the proactive identification and mitigation of risk, bias, and deception. This is the defensive aspect of practical intelligence. It is the shield that assumes failure is possible and actively verifies crucial data points to prevent catastrophic losses. Adaptive action, the ability to take the right action at the right time and adjust when new information changes the situation. You don't send the angry email. You pause and respond with empathy. You don't cling to a failing approach. You refine it. You simplify priorities instead of shouting, "Work harder," and you pivot when reality demands it. Throughout history, the wisest figures have separated simple knowledge from effective action. Listen to what they recognized about the power of practical intelligence. First, on the power of action and consequence, the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle recognized, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." This speaks to the necessary reflective dimension of practical intelligence. You must understand your own biases and vulnerabilities before you can hope to judge the outside world clearly. Second, on the importance of testing reality, the famous physicist Richard Feynman stated, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." This highlights the fundamental challenge of practical intelligence. The most difficult person to apply skepticism to is yourself. You must relentlessly check your assumptions against objective reality. These masters remind us that practical intelligence starts not with a grand discovery, but with a simple, humble act of self-awareness and commitment to reality. Let's revisit one of the largest financial frauds in history, which perfectly illustrates how a lack of practical intelligence can override vast knowledge. Bernie Madoff was a respected Wall Street figure who promised steady, high investment returns every single month. This was impossible, but many sophisticated investors trusted him anyway. In reality, he was running a $65 billion Ponzi scheme. A Ponzi scheme is simple. Money from new investors is used to pay old investors. No real profits. The scheme only works as long as new money keeps flowing in. The practical intelligence red flags were very clear. His returns were too smooth. Markets fluctuate, his results never did. His strategy was secretive. No transparency, and no independent third party ever verified his trades. Here is the critical psychological failure. Many investors who saw the numbers felt a twinge of doubt, but they suffered from confirmation bias. They didn't want the perfect returns to be fake, so they sought out information that confirmed their desire to believe in Madoff's genius, rather than seeking information that disproved it. They valued the feeling of being in on the secret more than the rigorous truth of financial reality. Now let's look at someone who did apply practical intelligence. Harry Markopolos. Markopolos was a financial analyst who was asked to review Madoff's investment strategy. Within minutes, he concluded, "This is mathematically impossible." He didn't rely on Madoff's reputation. He relied on practical intelligence. He trusted the data, the math, and the fundamental realities of financial markets. His clarity came from the courage to trust his skeptical judgment. Practical intelligence isn't just about avoiding a specific lie. It's about anticipating the future. The single most powerful concept you can adopt is second-order thinking. Most people are stuck in first-order thinking. This is fast, simple, and often wrong. It sees only the immediate surface-level consequence of an action. For example, the first-order effect of a new tax on sugar is less sugar consumption. Good. A person with practical intelligence jumps to the second-order effect and asks, "And then what?" The second-order effect of a tax on sugar might be that manufacturers replace sugar with cheaper, less regulated artificial sweeteners that have unknown long-term health risks. Or it may cause low-income consumers to switch to other, equally unhealthy but untaxed foods. The solution created a new, possibly worse problem. Another example. The first-order effect of working 80 hours a week is more money and faster promotion. Good. The second-order effect, however, is burnout, the degradation of personal relationships, and a lack of the creative, unstructured time needed for true innovation. The core practice of practical intelligence is training your brain to see 2, 3, or even 4 steps ahead. It is the foresight that separates simple reaction from strategic, wise action. Now that we have clearly identified the pillars of practical intelligence and seen the evidence of its power and absence, it is time to move from theory to action. These 9 steps are the fastest path to developing true practical intelligence and wisdom starting today. Observe before you act. Pause, absorb the environment, and read the room before speaking or committing. The rationale. Most mistakes happen because of impatience. A single moment of pause gives your perceptive brain time to process critical, nonverbal cues and subtle power dynamics that dictate success. Follow incentives, not words. People behave based on rewards, not declarations. The rationale. Never take an assertion at face value. Instead, ask, what does this person gain if I agree? Understanding their true incentive instantly reveals where their loyalty lies, and it's rarely with you. Notice patterns. In behavior, markets, or relationships, patterns repeat. Patterns predict outcomes. The rationale. Reality is not random. If a pattern of dishonesty, quick success, or high turnover exists, it is a stronger predictor of the future than any current promise. Ask better questions. Instead of asking, is this a good idea? Ask, what would make this a bad idea? The rationale. This switches your mindset from seeking confirmation, which is easy, to seeking disconfirmation, which is wise. Good ideas are resilient to skeptical questions. Bad ideas collapse immediately. Reflect daily. 2 minutes of reflection converts raw daily experience into wisdom. The rationale. Experience is not the same as wisdom. Wisdom is processed experience. By reflecting on where you were fooled or where you excelled, you update your mental models for better future performance. Practice mini courage. Tiny acts of courage, like asking a tough, clarifying question, build the confidence needed for big decisions. The rationale. Practical intelligence requires you to speak up against momentum and comfort. Start small by questioning a minor detail or asking for clarification, building the muscle memory for high-stakes moments. Think in second-order effects. This is the most powerful tool for practical intelligence. Always ask, and then what? If I take this first action, what is the consequence of that consequence? This single question is the best protection against avoidable mistakes. The rationale. First-order thinking is easy. It makes you look smart now. Second-order thinking is difficult. It makes you wise later by preventing unintended catastrophic consequences. Stress test your plan. Before you commit to a major decision, intentionally argue against it. Play the devil's advocate and ask, how will this fail? The rationale. This actively trains your mind to spot the holes that your own bias would usually ignore, protecting you from avoidable risks. You want to find the fatal flaw before reality does. The skeptical audit. Never fully outsource your due diligence. If someone hands you a number, verify it using a source they cannot control. If a claim sounds impossible, trust your gut. Treat any secrecy or refusal to provide objective verification as an absolute, immediate red flag that forces you to walk away. The rationale. This is the core of protective wisdom. When stakes are high, you must be the final filter. Verifying critical data independently is the simplest way to guard against professional deception. Success is never about who knows the most facts. It is about who can see clearly, think wisely, and act effectively when life becomes complex. Practical intelligence is the skill that protects you when knowledge isn't enough. It helps beginners avoid disaster and helps experts avoid complacency. The compounding effect of making just one extra wise decision a month for a decade is how true mastery is built. It is the skill school never taught you, but it is the skill that decides your success. In the words of Leonardo da Vinci, knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do. If this video gave you something valuable, please like, share, and subscribe. Together, we're building a world where wisdom is practical, accessible, and life-changing. JPIW New York. Room for the brain. See you in the next episode.